हे गाइस, ये आपका फ्रेंडली नेबरहुड और मैं वापस आ चुका हूँ एक और रिएक्शन वीडियो के साथ। और इस बार हम रिएक्ट करने वाले हैं ड्रिप सॉस के डीसी डिबंक के बारे में। तो अगर आप लोगों को पता नहीं है कि डिबंक क्या होता है, तो सिंपली ये कहूँ, मान लो जैसे कोई ओवररेटेड एनिमे है, मान लो, या फिर ओवररेटेड एनिमे या फिर कोई शो है जिसे आप बहुत ज़्यादा ओवररेटेड दिखाते हैं, बोलते हैं कि वो ज़्यादा स्ट्रॉन्ग है या फिर कुछ ज़्यादा ही वीक है। तो अगर आप उसे अच्छे से स्केल करके वापस नीचे लाते हैं, मान लो ज़्यादा ऊपर चला गया और आप उसे वापस नीचे ला रहे हैं, बोल रहे हैं इतना पावरफुल नहीं है, इतना वीक पे है, तो वो उसे हम डिबंक कहते हैं। ये ज़्यादातर स्केलिंग में यूज़ होता है, स्केलिंग और डिबेट्स में। और आप लोगों ने मेरे चैनल पे देखा, क्योंकि मैं बहुत सारे डिबेट शॉर्ट्स में आता हूँ, उन्हें ज़्यादा सीरियस मत लीजिएगा, वो बस मेरी एडिटिंग स्किल्स को इम्प्रूव करने के लिए है। तो आज हम इस वीडियो को चेक करेंगे जो कि है डीसी के बारे में। डीसी, अगर आप लोगों को पता होगा, सुपरमैन वगैरह वो सब कॉमिक्स को आज ड्रिप सॉस डिबंक करने वाले हैं। और आज हम पता चलेगा कि आखिर ये किस लेवल पर आती है और या फिर इसका स्केल कितना है। तो ओरिजिनल वीडियो की लिंक आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन में मिल जाएगी, आप वहाँ पर जाकर इस वीडियो को चेक कर सकते हैं। और मैं हाईली रिकमेंड करूँगा कि जाकर चेक करें, क्योंकि यहाँ पर वीडियो में थोड़ी इंटरप्शन हो सकती है। मैं बात करने के लिए थोड़ा रोक सकता हूँ, लेकिन थोड़ा समझ रहे हो ना। तो ओके, बिना किसी तरह के अपन वीडियो को शुरू करते हैं। और मैं गाइस आप लोगों को हाईली रिकमेंड करूँगा कि ड्रिप सॉस के चैनल को एक ना एक बार जाकर ज़रूर चेक करें, क्योंकि ड्रिप सॉस की मैं यूँ कहूँ तो स्केलिंग बहुत ही ज़बरदस्त है। तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं। ओके,
Standing below even quantum barriers is the foundation of reality known as the microverse, as even the atoms themselves are considered entire universes housing multiple celestial bodies such as planets and stars in a molecular chain. If this infinitesimal plane of existence was ever disturbed, all of reality would collapse along with it. Transcending this microscopic plane is the base universe, which is stated to have expanded over 60 trillion light years in half a second, which would actually make the universe over 112 nonillion light years long, with our current universe only being about 98 billion light years in diameter. But this is actually a lowball, as there's several statements implying that the universe is actually infinite in size. However, you can argue that some of these statements are knowledge claims or hyperbolically describing the universe from their perspective, as infinite can just mean very great. But do whatever you want with those scans.
okay. What I believe, the universe are finite in size, more consistency. I will add more consistency later, but infinite is being used hyperbolically, and from the knowledge claims here, it has an edge and a defined size, so it's not ट्रू इन्फिनिट। तो यहाँ पर ड्रिप सॉस ये कह रहे हैं कि डीसी के जो यूनिवर्स है वो पूरी तरह से इन्फिनिट नहीं है, क्योंकि इसे भले ही इन्फिनिट बोला जाता है, लेकिन इन्फिनिट का मतलब ये भी हो सकता है कि कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा बड़ा है जिसे हम बस माप नहीं सकते। तो सिंपली इसे इन्फिनिट एक बार में कह देना, सिर्फ स्टेटमेंट सब कुछ नहीं करती, आपको इसे प्रूव भी करना होता है। तो देखते हैं यहाँ पर आगे क्या होता है।
Beyond the vastness of the universe is a conceptual space known as the Orrery of Worlds, which is comprised of a seemingly infinite amount of universes vibrating in the same dimensional space, with there being universes spawned from every decision and quantum event, which is word for word the many worlds interpretation theory that allows for this infinite metaverse to exist. However, there's multiple scans that indicate that the universes are no longer infinite in number, so take that analogy with a grain of salt. Existing as a parallel to the Orrery of Worlds is the Dark Multiverse, which is a twisted and corrupted reality containing evil versions of the many characters that are seen in DC, with the realities in the Dark Multiverse being formed out of the hopes and fears of everyone in the Orrery, housing the physical manifestations of their deepest and darkest fears. With the entire cosmology up to this point surmounting to a seemingly infinite number of fourth dimensional constructs, but in all truth, we've barely gotten started. Existing between and beyond these dimensions is the Bleed, an infinite hyperspace between universes that dwarfs all of creation below it, fundamentally transcending everything to the point that you need fourth dimensional levels of vision to comprehend this reality, with there being multiple statements of the Bleed being pan-dimensional, which is obviously in context to it containing all the
pan-dimensional, containing all dimensions. This is an context to the words, not all mathematically dimensions. Dimensions in the words is interchangeable with universes. We know that this is the context as we, oh wait, a representation of parallel worlds in the glass tube behind them, aka parallel dimensions. The concept is that from the house of heroes which exists inside the bleed, you can access all dimensions and universes. तो bleed कई बार बहुत सारे लोग ज़्यादा ही overrated बता देते हैं, कहते हैं कि कई डिमेंशनल्स आ गया, यानी कि हाइपर वर्सल लेवल पे जाता है, कहते हैं कि ये इन्फिनिट डिमेंशनल है, लेकिन असलियत में ऐसा नहीं है, ये काफ़ी कॉम्प्लेक्स है। मैं ज़्यादातर डिबंक वीडियो नहीं बनाता क्योंकि डिबंकिंग में मेरे पास ज़्यादा स्कैन्स और प्रूफ्स दिखाने के लिए वो सब सोर्स नहीं है, तो ऑब्वियस सी बात है।
Universes. A fifth dimensional being named Mixie states that the fifth dimension is imagination, and that imagination is a blood of the multiverse existing outside of time and is omnipresent within it. With the same imagination being described as the energy that flows between realms, being stated to be everything at once existing backward and forward simultaneously. This is insane because the bleed fits those descriptions perfectly, with the bleed being speculated as a higher dimensional fluid, and the house of heroes which exists at the center of the bleed being stated to be rotating throughout the fifth dimension. So the fifth dimension is the bleed? That's actually crazy. There's many implications that the fifth dimensional beings are actually just higher dimensional in general. A fifth dimensional imp states that she exists in a mathematical higher dimension, with it being stated that they comprise of a five-dimensional existence. When a being from the three-dimensional universe appears in a fifth dimension, he's completely flat, with it being stated to be a transgeometric plane of existence, with transgeometric referring to higher mathematical dimensions. There's also statements regarding the fact that time in the fifth dimension is endless compared to that of the third.
ओके, तो मैं ज़्यादा कॉमिक्स नहीं पढ़ता हूँ, मुझे हल्का नॉलेज ज़्यादा नहीं, मैं उतना कॉमिक्स का उतना फ़ैन नहीं हूँ, ज़्यादातर मांगास ही पढ़ी है। कॉमिक्स में बहुत बहुत कम पढ़ी है, मैंने ज़्यादातर यूट्यूब्स पर ही देखी होगी, जैसे कॉस्मिका में सुपरमैन वगैरह वगैरह, डार्केस्ट नाइट, ये सब मैंने यूँ ही देखी, समझ लो थोड़ा बहुत एंटरटेनमेंट के लिए। मैंने कभी कॉमिक्स को पूरी तरह से पढ़ा नहीं है, मतलब कोई सोर्स नहीं है इंडिया में हमें कॉमिक्स पढ़ने का उतना कोई सोर्स मिलता नहीं है, तो मैं ज़्यादातर यहाँ पर स्कैन।
Mr. Mixie is also one of the strongest fifth dimensional beings in the multiverse, as he's able to casually one-shot the entire fifth dimension. With this level of transcendence qualifying for low complex multiversal on a Turing system, however, there's much more to be said. Let's quickly brush over some of the misconceptions that are used to scale the verse. The first argument stems from the scan, however, taking a look at it, we can already see why it's not valid. It says that 11 dimensions are unquantifiable and exploded to create all things, but this contradicts any current study about 11 dimensions, so we can't apply the complex
Okay, तो 11 dimension, या जब डीसी में 11 dimension के बारे में बताया गया कि अनक्वांटिफाइबल है, ये सब बताया गया, लेकिन इसमें प्रॉब्लम ये है कि इसे कभी प्रूफ नहीं किया गया। मान लो इसे कभी दिखाया नहीं गया, ये सिर्फ कॉन्टेक्स्ट में दिखाया गया। मान लो नैरेटिव में बस इतना पता था कि कोलैप्स्ड बैक इनटू द अनक्वांटिफाइड 11 dimensions फ्रॉम विच ऑल थिंग्स इन द यूनिवर्स वर लॉन्ग अगो एक्सप्लोडेड। असलियत में इसके बारे में कुछ बताया नहीं गया कि 11 dimensional पूरी तरह से है भी या नहीं, तो इसका कोई ढंग का प्रूफ है नहीं, तो इसे एक्सेप्ट करना थोड़ा मुश्किल है।
multiversal theories, because if you're gonna use real life definitions, make sure that they match the studies about 11 dimensions in real life science, which is what the Turing system is based upon. So this argument really can't be used, and it's likely referring to some other type of dimension, so no, this is not in context to string theory. The next argument stems from this scan where it also mentions 11 dimensions. However, these dimensions are actually contextualized as universes. We know this because it uses the terms universe and multiverse interchangeably within the same scan. And it depicts multiple parallel worlds, talking about how the multiverse is theoretically speculated as existing layered beyond the 11 known dimensions, which is in context to it being far more than 11 universes.
डीसी में ऐसा कई बार हुआ है कि डिमेंशंस को एक तरह से यूनिवर्स को एक तरह से डिमेंशन कहा गया है। मान लो जैसे एक पैरेलल यूनिवर्स है तो उसे एक पैरेलल डिमेंशन कहा जाता है, तो ये सिर्फ एक कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, ये बस एक नाम है, ये सिर्फ एक नेम फैलेसी बन जाता है यहाँ पर, क्योंकि उन्होंने डिमेंशन टर्म का इस्तेमाल एक यूनिवर्स के लिए किया है। तो हाँ, काफ़ी कॉम्प्लेक्स चीज़ है।
universes. Something being layered doesn't automatically imply that it entails a dimensional difference, and it still doesn't matter because the study in of itself is theoretical. And no, this is not in context to string theory either. The next argument has statements regarding 14 dimensions, but it completely lacks any type of context on what aspect of reality it's referring to. So we can't just assume that it's referring to the base universe. And even if you wanted to argue it did exist, it would also exist above realms like the 6th dimension, which is the highest plane of existence, hence nobody would scale to it. Not to mention, it's completely inconsistent within DC, and you can easily argue it's been retconned, much like the Ultimator in the 10th dimension, due to the aforementioned points about the 6th. The next argument
डीसी और मार्वल के साथ जो प्रॉब्लम वो है कि इन्हें कई बार रेटकॉन किया गया है, कई बार इन्हें रिन्यू किया गया है, कई बार इन्हें चेंज कर दिया गया है। उसकी वजह से इसे स्केल करना काफ़ी मुश्किल बन जाता है। तो स्केलिंग वगैरह की जब बात आती है तो डीसी और मार्वल को स्केल करने में बहुत सारा, समझ लो, दिमाग खराब करने वाला काम है।
comes from this scan talking about 28 dimensions, but it's just talking about 28 known worlds or universes that Metron is traveling through. Dimensions have consistently been referred to as universes in DC, so there's no reason to assume that it's referring to higher spatial dimensions without any evidence. The next scan is pretty interesting because it talks about 196,000 dimensions, but this is actually just a theoretical model of the multiverse created by a computer. And just as I said before, something theoretical is not confirmed and doesn't physically exist. This is supported by the fact that scientists even theorize about whether or not it could exist in a three-dimensional space, and it's confirmed to be in context to universes and not higher dimensional layers, so overall it's not a usable scan. The next scan in question says parallel worlds and infinite dimensions. The argument is that since it already talks about the existence of parallel worlds, then infinite dimensions must be in context to higher spatial dimensions. However, this argument is bad for multiple reasons. One being that the term dimensions already refers to universes in DC, so statements regarding infinite dimensions is just in context of there being infinite universes. And the existence of parallel worlds can just be in reference to the quality of said universes, as it's affirming the fact that they are parallel to each other, and the quantity of said universes being infinite in number, hence both the quantity.
मुझे एक बात माननी पड़ेगी, एडिटिंग वगैरह सब कुछ एकदम परफेक्ट। सॉन्ग मतलब बैकग्राउंड म्यूजिक, एडिटिंग और थोड़ी स्पीच वगैरह सब कुछ एकदम बढ़िया। बस भाई एक माइक ले लो, सब कुछ परफेक्ट हो जाए।
And the quality of said universes are addressed. The thing that actually supports this is that they never refer to the parallel worlds themselves as infinite within this scan. So assuming that dimensions would automatically have a distinction to parallel worlds when it's easier to just denote that they mean the same thing would be very disingenuous. And trust me, it's very common in fiction in general to say two words that mean the same thing in the same sentence, mostly just to sound more cinematic and entertaining. Picture me saying there are infinite universes. That sounds pretty dry. But picture me saying this instead. There are parallel worlds and infinite dimensions. That sounds more cinematic, hence more entertaining for the reader, even though the word dimensions and worlds are actually entailing the same thing, which is the concept of parallel universes. Some people try to use Paul Jenkins' statement regarding each universe having infinite dimensions to support this argument. However, Paul Jenkins later on in
पॉल जेंकिंस की जो स्टेटमेंट्स उन पर आप पूरी तरह भरोसा नहीं कर सकते, क्योंकि पॉल जेंकिंस के पास पूरी तरह से एक अथॉरिटी तो नहीं है। वो एक अलग से ऑथर है जो इसमें काम करते हैं। तो यूँ समझ लो उन्हें खुद पता नहीं है वो क्या बोल रहे हैं। तो उनकी स्टेटमेंट्स को आप पूरी तरह से सीरियस नहीं मान सकते। तो
imply that he was just referring to the fact that each of the universes have infinite counterparts, and confirms the authentic intention of it referring to just infinite universes when writing these comics. People actually use this scan where it says worlds beyond worlds to make the conclusion that they are each transcendent of themselves, since the synonym of beyond is transcend. But what people don't understand is that beyond
तो यहाँ पर जो बताया जा रहा है कि डीसी में ऐसा कई बार बोला गया है कि वर्ल्ड्स बियॉन्ड वर्ल्ड्स, यानी दुनिया के पार भी एक दुनिया है। तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि वो दुनिया से ऊपर है या फिर उस दुनिया से ट्रांसेंड करती है, उससे ज़्यादा हायर लेवल पर है। इसका बस इतना मतलब है कि उस दुनिया के बाहर एक और दुनिया है। उसमें ऐसा नहीं कहते कि वो उस दुनिया से कुछ ज़्यादा स्ट्रॉन्ग है या फिर उस दुनिया से ज़्यादा ऊपर लेवल की है। ऐसा कभी बताया नहीं गया। तो आप इसे ऐसा मत समझ लेना है। बहुत सारे लोग ये गलती करते हैं जब स्केलिंग और डिबेट की बारी आती है तो
doesn't automatically equate to transcend. For example, if I say that my rooftop is beyond the reaches of little children, I will be correct grammatically speaking, but that doesn't create a situation where my rooftop is dimensionally transcendent over the little children. They are literally depicted as the exact same size in reference to the fact that those worlds are separate from each other. So the argument doesn't logically follow, hence can be dismissed via non sequitur. Another argument is that DC has quantum mechanics, which means that it follows the many worlds interpretation and Tegmark's Type 3 multiverse framework, which is infinite dimensional in nature. But just because you follow some aspects of a theory doesn't mean that you follow all of it. Very specific conditions need to be actualized to allow for infinite degrees of freedom and supersymmetry, which would then entail infinite dimensional spaces, but DC doesn't have any of these conditions, and they simply use the many worlds interpretation to explain the existence of infinite universes. Some people make the argument that theories like implicate order exist in a verse. However, you have to prove that said theory is cosmologically applicable and axiomatically exists in a verse. Otherwise, it would just remain a theory within the minds of people aware of it, which we cannot assume to be cosmologically real inside of DC. Just as we can't assume that theories in our real world are real unless they are proven. This also applies to all other scaling methods that involve the use of theories to scale the verse. It makes no sense because you'd basically be saying that because we think about or theorize about higher dimensions, then they would automatically exist, but this argument falls under a non sequitur. I've seen this argument that DC repeats itself infinitely, with this making a high hyperversal. However, there is no proof that these are all higher dimensions, as it could just be referring to an infinite lower dimensional regression, because the base universe in DC is already confirmed to just be three-dimensional, which is where the regression actually starts from. And this is probably not even the context at all, as it's just a context of them being trapped inside a comic book, and there was no intention for this to be of a transcendence. And no, you can't ask me to prove that because it's a negative claim. I'm affirming the non-existence of the evidence for the intention of that scan being a dimensional transcendence. Now that we've addressed the misconceptions about the cosmology, let's move on to the next cosmological structure, the speed force. The speed force has been stated to be an extra-dimensional energy that gives the universe motion. This is why speedsters are able to travel through time, because they have access to the speed force which exists outside of it. Depending on the context, extra-dimensional can just mean outside the universe and not necessarily having any higher dimensional properties. Wonderworld is a place that exists on the Speed Force wall itself and orbits the Ori at unimaginable speeds. Now, there's an argument that since Wonderworld is stated to be at the furthest perimeter of space and time, then whatever comes after it is not a dimensional construct. However, that completely skips over the fact that the guy in the scan says that whatever is beyond it is unknowable. So he doesn't know whether or not there's space-time beyond it, so you can't just cherry-pick one of the statements and ignore the implications of the other. Now we move on to the next cosmological structure, the time stream. This is essentially the stream of time itself, and it's addressed as the fourth dimension, which is actually stated on multiple occasions to be time itself within DC. It's basically a place where you can access and observe future and past events all at the same time, and it's implied to be a place that speedsters use to access multiple points in time, as it's accessible via the speed force. The time stream is unaffected by the flow of time or the confines of three-dimensional space within the timelines or the universes that you can access from it, and actually exists completely beyond them. This doesn't make the time stream 5D because, as I said earlier, being beyond something doesn't mean that you transcend it, and multiple three-dimensional beings have existed in the time stream, so we cannot be higher dimensional. Now to the next cosmological structure, the sphere of the gods. Existing outside of all the universes is the kingdom of the gods, a plane of existence created and prominently ruled by magic. Through the collective unconscious, the gods are created from the beliefs of humanity. The sphere of the gods contains multiple realms such as heaven, a land of infinite dreams being infinite in size, and hell, which is the exact opposite of heaven, making it infinite by extension. The dreaming and the nightmare, which is where people go when they dream, are infinite and finite at the same time. Then you have Skyland, which is where all the mythological gods exist, and the underworld, which is the polar opposite of Skyland. And we can't forget the giant planets known as New Genesis and Apocalypse, which are homes to Darkseid and Highfather. But wait, where does it scale? The sphere of the gods is dimensional in nature. It's verbatim stated multiple times. It's also stated to be beyond space and time on multiple occasions, which doesn't mean it's a higher dimension, as I mentioned.
Yep. कई बार बताया गया कि बियॉन्ड का मतलब ट्रांसेंड करना नहीं होता, मतलब आप उस लेवल से ऊपर नहीं, बस आप उसके पार हैं। कॉन्टेक्स्ट इज इट्स अ डिस्टेंस सेपरेट realm. Here's the evidence it's not higher dimensional. Okay.
Earlier. This is evident as Darkseid casted shadows on the multiverse as he fell through, and it's logically impossible to cast a shadow onto something unless the object casting said shadow is three-dimensional and finite. Another thing that supports this is that the monitor's machines could record information across all of time and space and recorded the creation of the new gods, which implies that they exist within time and space. There's also stated to be space and dimensional rifts within this.
तो सिंपली कहें तो अगर आप टाइम के बियॉन्ड है तो आपका कोई पास्ट या प्रेजेंट कोई देख नहीं सकता, मतलब पास्ट और फ्यूचर को कोई नहीं देख सकता। तो ये ऐसा तभी होता है अगर आप टाइम के बियॉन्ड है, मतलब टाइम को ट्रांसेंड करते हैं। अगर आप टाइम के अंडर आते हैं तो आपका एक पास्ट भी है और आपका एक फ्यूचर भी है जिसे कोई और देख सकता है। तो यहाँ पर जैसा कि इन्होंने बताया, ड्रिप ने कहा कि वो एक कंप्यूटर स्कैनर के ज़रिए लोगों का पास्ट और फ्यूचर देखते हैं। तो सिंपली बोले तो वो टाइम के अंडर ही है अभी भी।
The gods, and even years and time periods being recorded inside of it. Even more evidence is when Metron was in the sphere of the gods, he was caught in a space-time vortex and was scared of getting lost between dimensional planes. Now the god sphere is also stated to be a higher vibrational world, and we know this is not in context of dimensionality due to the aforementioned points about the universes being vibrational worlds, because we actually know that there's worlds with no vibrations in DC. Batman was traveling through several points in time and comes across Zeus, who exists in the god sphere. Vandal Savage was trying to take over the sphere of the gods' temporality using a meteorite in Batman: The Return of Bruce Wayne, and Vandal Savage's attempt to manipulate the god sphere using the meteorite's energy to control time and
इनमें से बहुत सारे चैप्टर्स और कॉमिक्स ऐसी जो मैंने अब तक देखी भी नहीं है, और ये काफ़ी लंबी वीडियो है, तो मैं सोच रहा हूँ इसे 2 पार्ट में डिवाइड कर दूँ। दोनों को अलग अलग टाइम पे डालूँगा, लेकिन डालूँगा ज़रूर, तो टेंशन मत लेना।
shape history occurs throughout the entire miniseries. The storyline spans 6 issues, starting from issue 1 and concluding with issue 6, and he took control of time across all worlds, including the sphere of the gods. There's even more evidence that proves the god sphere is dimensional in nature through the existence of time, which is basically the sum total of all realities, dimensions, and time streams, which includes the god sphere. The physical manifestation of hypertime is a place called the brainfold interior, which is a place between places and a time between times. Hypertime is part of the divine continuum, which is yet another way to prove that these realms are dimensional in nature, as it literally states in a scan that hypertime is under the category of time of the divine continuum, and the god sphere is under the category of space, meaning it's a spatial dimension. And they tell Batman again all of space and time. All of these points just work hand in hand together, and you cannot deny that the god sphere is dimensional in nature. This doesn't now inherently mean that whatever realms come after the divine continuum would not be dimensional in nature, as that would be a non sequitur argument, and there's evidence for them being dimensional in nature, so don't make that argument. I've seen the argument that the multiverse is conceptual, hence making it unbound by spatial temporality, but this argument doesn't hold any weight due to the fact that just because something is called conceptual doesn't necessarily mean it's in reference to abstractions. There's multiple pieces of evidence suggesting that the contents of the divine continuum are dimensional in nature, so conceptual is just being used metaphorically, just like in the case of the Orrery. People try to use this scan where Batman states that the gods are powerful living ideas from a kind of Platonic archetypal world to say that it scales them to outer-versal. However, this is only in context of the gods being the embodiment or actualization of subjective concepts like love, hatred, good, evil, etc., which have no external, universally applicable axioms to rest on as regards to space-time, which is the only concept that can scale you to outer-versal, as well as the applications of space-time like gravity and mathematics. And Platonism doesn't actually scale you to outer-versal, as the concepts within Platonism in of itself are subjective.